Good morning. Welcome to this dreary but maybe fitting day for our conversation. My name is Callie Hawkins, and I'm the CEO and Executive Director of President Lincoln's Cottage. Well, thank you. I was not expecting that. Thank you, Bruce. On behalf of our entire team, I want to welcome you all to our 10th annual Lincoln Ideas Forum. For those of you who are visiting for the first time or joining us virtually, Abraham Lincoln lived here with his family for over a quarter of his presidency and developed some of his most nation-changing ideas here, most notably crafting the Emancipation Proclamation in this very room. Today, through innovative guided tours, exhibits, and programs like this one, we connect people to the true spirit of the Lincolns, build empathy, and preserve this place as a beacon of hope for all who take up Lincoln's unfinished work. As part of that unfinished work, President Lincoln's Cottage hosts the annual Lincoln Ideas Forum to commemorate Lincoln's last visit to the cottage, which was the day before his assassination. We started this program 10 years ago to bring together scholars and practitioners from distinct disciplines to give voice to topics and perspectives that connect the history of this place and what Lincoln accomplished here with how we understand his ideas and life today. Next year, America will commemorate its semi-quincentennial, I've practiced, or its 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. This milestone gives us an opportunity to make great strides toward repairing long-standing divisions in our nation, but it also opens us up to deepening them. With that in mind, in early 2024, the Cottage convened academics, museum practitioners, and social scientists to think about the possibilities of centering humanity in the nation's commemorations. Unsurprisingly, fear was a through line in all our discussions. According to a recent Chapman University study, the most common fears among Americans were corrupt government officials, biological, cyber, and nuclear warfare, economic security, and the suffering and death of loved ones. The list of fears certainly tells us much about our current moment. But how have unconscious fears around identity, belonging, and safety shaped the structures of our nation? How has fear historically wedged Americans apart? And when has fear brought us together? Fear related to politics, interpersonal communication, and the well-being of our communities can be paralyzing and lead to disengagement. And it can also drive us to community, propel us to action. We are so grateful for the chance to hold this particular space with you today. So often, places are remembered for the consequential events that happened in them, the monumental moments that occurred between four walls. This room certainly holds that mythology. More precious, though, to me, are the spaces that allowed their inhabitants just to be in all their human forms. For me, that is the special power of this particular room. And maybe more so than any other room associated with Abraham Lincoln's life and presidency, here he could just be, vulnerable and unveiled, triumphant and tired, together and alone, afraid and brave. I often imagine Lincoln pulling himself up those stairs each night, weary and beleaguered, rising in this room each morning to new challenges and chances and a resolute vision for the future. Whatever brought you here today, whether you're feeling fearful or courageous, or maybe even both of those things at once, we're honored that you sought community here. And I hope this room adds a bit of weight and inspiration for our conversation this morning. It's now my great honor to introduce you to Andrea Jones, our moderator for today's forum. Andrea is a museum consultant, educator, and big picture thinker. She designs and facilitates learning experiences that enable people to widen their perspectives, learn about themselves, and connect with our common humanity. At the heart of Andrea's work are her values in action: empathy building, curiosity, and creativity. Before consulting, Andrea served in several leadership positions within museums, including the Atlanta History Center, Accokeek Foundation, and Smithsonian's Anacostia Community Museum. Andrea is also the director of the History Leadership Institute, a transformative program for developing human-centered leadership in the field of public history. Curiously absent from Andrea's official bio is perhaps one of her more challenging roles as one of my closest friends. Andrea and I bonded years ago over our mutual affinity for a cold Diet Coke and separate but seminal experiences meeting His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Andrea is curious and wise and is on a very short list of people I call when I'm doubting myself or feeling afraid. She is a sage guide for our time together this morning, and please welcome Andrea Jones.
Oh my gosh. I mean, do I want to cry first thing? Oh, I love you, Kelly. So I want to thank the team here at President Lincoln's Cottage for always hosting programs that really get to the heart of what we're all going through at the moment. And so today we have a program about fear. What could be more relevant in 2025? Right, but I feel good about doing that in a place that calls itself the home for brave ideas. So before I get into framing this event, I want to kind of tell you what's going to happen. We're here until 12 p.m. I want to take care of you, and so that means that I want to invite you to take care of yourselves. That means going to the bathroom when you need to, if you need to step outside. Take care of the things that make you able to listen and hear. And I also want to say that in the pursuit of psychological safety, we want to make sure that we tell people that there will be a speaker who makes references to lynching today. So if that's a sensitive thing for you, you know it ahead of time, and we can make you ready for that. And you can consider what you want to do right now. We have 4 speakers. They're going to speak for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we're going to have a thoughtful discussion, all of us, and I can't wait for that part. That's the good part. I want you to be thinking about what you're getting out of this really brilliant group that we have here today. So I was asked to frame today's conversations, and I want to tell you a brief story. I think that does a good job of framing it. So I was at the convening, the 250th, that Callie was making reference to here in January of 2024. There was 20 of us, scholars, thinkers, educators. We were here to discuss the nation's big birthday coming up next year. So for 2 days, we explored how to commemorate this anniversary, how to hold it all together. The celebration of a notable power, maybe the most powerful country on earth, but together with the shame and the grief, the deeds that were done, and all of that in pursuit of that great accomplishment. I mean, it's a lot to kind of take together. So in these group exercises, we were tasked with uncovering the root causes of some of America's biggest problems. No big deal. Just do that for us. But it was such a good conversation. And like Callie mentioned, one through line in every single group was this idea of fear, that it was a core catalyst for the harm that we were all feeling. So things like fear of the unfamiliar, fear of losing status, fear of losing culture, valuable resources, fear of death. this was a big aha moment, I think, for all of us. And I thought to myself, so if we understand that fear is at the root of bigotry and violence and greed and war, and yes, tariffs, then now I know what we have to do. We just need to stop being afraid, right? Just do the right thing. So I offered this as a sort of call to action in the group, thinking that I had figured out a new direction for us all. And then one of our group members, Laura Banks, gently stepped into the conversation. Laura is a compassion educator, and it has a much more accurate and nuanced understanding of fear than I had. She explained, we can't get rid of fear because it is an integral part of being human. It's protective. It helps us survive. Fear, and she said, fear has been with us since the time that we lived in caves, and it will continue to be with us until the time that we cannot breathe. It's just part of us. And I thought, well, crap. How could that be? I mean, everything in our culture tells us to ignore fear, to fight through it, to be fearless. I got the message. Fear, bad. Courage, good. What Laura provided me on that day was what we in education circles call cognitive dissonance. She poked at an assumption that I had about fear, and it set me on a mission to be more fully understanding of fear as an emotion and in myself. So the first thing I did when I got home was to Google, why do we need fear? Legit, this is exactly what I Googled. And up pops a story of an anonymous research subject by the name of SM. Any of you know about this? So SM is a woman who is alive today. She's currently in her 50s. When she was a child, a rare disease killed her amygdala. Amygdala is this part of your brain. It's just like a little almond-shaped part that activates our fear. She didn't have it. It wasn't working. So she had lost the ability to be afraid. People might think, well, that sounds great, right? So although, part of it actually is great. I mean, SM goes through life, generally happy disposition, right? But she has almost died 3 or 4 times, okay? She has been held at gunpoint. She has been mugged in alleys. She has been abused by partners. She stands way too close to people when she talks. She doesn't know who to trust, and she doesn't know which alleys not to go in. And after reading this, I thought, okay, I get it. Fear is useful. Fear is necessary. Now, I made a drawing to remind myself of it. That I have to look at it and be friends with my fear. In fact, I was following the advice of the wise one, Brene Brown, who said that our fears need to be understood and respected, perhaps even befriended. We need to pull up a chair and sit with them and understand why they're showing up and ask ourselves what there is to learn. It's like fear is some kind of messaging system to us, but we have to actually listen to it, right? And this might be part of the problem, that we're not looking at our fears, we're not pulling up that chair. We are afraid of fear itself. So here is my biggest revelation into this deep dive on fear. It comes from actually one of the best authors on the subject of fear that I've read so far, Dr. Harriet Lerner. And she wrote, "It is not fear that stops you from doing the brave and true things in your daily life. Rather, the problem is avoidance. You want to feel comfortable, so you avoid doing or saying the things that will evoke fear and difficult emotions. Avoidance will make you feel less vulnerable in the short run, but will never make you feel less afraid. This is big, right? I mean, avoidance. So I wondered, is it the avoidance of fear that causes the bigotry, the greed, the war, the rest? And now that I'm looking through this lens, I see it everywhere. You know, it's like John hurts Anthony, but instead of facing the fear of rejection, having a vulnerable conversation with John, Anthony avoids it. He doesn't want to look weak. So he saves up that resentment and other hurt feelings, ignoring them and eventually spilling them onto his kids, their kids. It's like, whew. So yes, this is making a little bit more sense to me now. It's the avoidance, I thought. It's the suppression. Is this what we need to address our heal our sick country? And I don't know the answer to that question, but this is where I'm at right now. So I would invite you to look for these moments in the stories that you hear today from our speakers. When is fear befriended? When is it ignored? And how can we really define true courage? So, and I also invite you to see it in yourselves, right? In the stories, and reflect on your own fears. And at the end, we'll have a group discussion, like I said, about what we've heard throughout. All right, so with that, I would love to introduce to you the first speaker on our list today. I'm already a fan, and I've just met her. Dr. Danielle Boos is an assistant professor of history and Black studies at Randolph-Macon College. She has a few degrees. I'm just going to tell you. I'm going to list all the degrees, and you're just going to be like, wow, when did you do that? How old are you? She has a master's degree from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in African American Studies, a master's degree from Cornell University in Africana Studies, a PhD in American History from the American University, and in the past 10 years, Donnell has worked in academia at Cornell University, American University, and Montgomery College. She has also worked extensively in the field of nonprofit youth development and college access in the DC metro area. Donnell's research is on the Black Power movement, in its contours, its effects, and its legacies in the Washington, D.C. area. So I have a feeling we're going to get a very local perspective today. She also has a really amazing podcast, which I've just begun to listen to, called Porch Tales. It's a narrative that chronicles the life of a little-known woman named Sister Coco, who is an important Black Power organizer. So Professor D. Boos, as she is known on her podcast, says that American society has a fear of its ugly history. So we are seeing lots of that today. And so she is going to share a few powerful stories of those who bravely told the truth and made us all better for it. And I'm ready for that. Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Boos.
Thank you for that. It's very, very kind. I'm just starting to get gray hair, so I'm just starting to betray my actual age. Still can pull the wool over the eyes of most of my students. Thanks for having me. I'm going to talk about some hard stuff, but some important stuff. I originally was going to talk about more local DC stuff, but then I was in Charlottesville yesterday, so I'm going to talk about Charlottesville. So yesterday I was in Charlottesville, and if you've ever been to Charlottesville, especially at this time of year, you know that it is beautiful, lovely rolling hills. And at this time of year, you start to get this vibrant green. You can see soft whites, yellow, lavender, really beautiful historic town. And this town is 1 hour away from my hometown of Lynchburg, Virginia. Now, I was there for a particular purpose with my family, and I was driving to my destination, so I took Ivy Road and eventually passed through the campus of University of Virginia. And it's a picturesque scene, and it was one that wasn't threatened by this rain that got me later in the day. All right. A mile and a half from where I was, and an equally quaint part of Charlottesville is East Jefferson Street. Right? Some of you might know that. There on the 500 block, there are red brick buildings in a historic district. These are really elegant buildings, and they're accented with matte black shutters. They're adorned with antique-looking lampposts. And by the buildings lay these handsome brick roads. If you look at the cross streets of East Jefferson and Park, you'll see that the street is carefully laid, diagonally patterned red bricks. And these beautiful streets, if you're riding in a car or you're riding your bike across them, give you a little bit of bump. That texture will help you to feel the past as you're moving across them. If you do that, you might pass a small lamp post that has a small, non-imposing black banner, and it reads in some great letters, so as not to be too distracting, Historic Court Square. And indeed, if you look just beyond, you can see the Albemarle County Courthouse. And it's an eye-catching building, punctuated by tall, classical-looking pillars and beautifully shuttered windows. The place is built carefully to look like a place of order and justice. And it is a celebration of American history in the physical landscape. And yet, a closer look of this beautiful place punctures the order, the harmony, and the sense of justice implied by the scene. You see, if you walk up closer to the courthouse, you'll see a historical marker with the headline, Lynching of John Henry James. It is a marker that is relatively new to this historic place. It was placed there July 12th, 2019, exactly 121 years after the lynching occurred. And its placement was the result of an effort by some concerned community members of Charlottesville and Albemarle County and a nonprofit called the Equal Justice Initiative. Also notable is the fact that the marker's placement in Charlottesville occurred just shy of 2 years earlier of an infamous two-day rally that culminated in a murder on August 12, 2017. But more on that later. For now, I want to keep your attention on the historical marker of 1898 and the lynching of John Henry James. You see, prior to the erection of this marker, it would have been unlikely that many would have known about this brutal extrajudicial event. The dominant narrative of this beautiful place is that it is justice and law, order, and there is justice, law, and order, and that it prevails in this space. And it was a narrative intentionally reinforced by the landscape and by the selected historical interpretations. These choices hid Charlottesville's more complex and ugly history, legacies built on difference and domination. And it was ugly, even frightening. I'm going to take you back. A Black newspaper called the Richmond Planet reported on the incident, the lynching incident, 4 days after it occurred, July 16, 1898. That story made the front page of the newspaper. The headline read, "They lynched him. A colored man dealt with, taken from the train. Died protesting innocence. A brutal murder. Mob makes no efforts at disguise. The law defied. Anarchy in Virginia." With this headline, the Richmond Planet indicts white America, who is clearly the they in that reference. To support the indictment, the newspaper gives details. They report John Henry James was a Black Charlottesville resident who was accused of assaulting a white woman. Assaulting is all there was. But this was enough to stir the outrage of many in the local white community, and an angry white mob assembled. So threatening was the mob that city officials secretly transported James from local police custody to nearby Staunton, Virginia. But James's life was spared for only hours more. When officials put him on the train to return to Charlottesville for court proceedings, he was seized from the train. The newspaper recorded it thus. And I'm going to read directly from the newspaper here. When the train was nearing Woods Crossing, about 4 miles west of this city, the officers noticed a crowd at the station and at once took in the situation. Chief Farish immediately went to the front door of the smoking car. As soon as the train slowed up, a number of men, unmasked, boarded the platform front and rear. All were armed with pistols, and there were about 150 in the crowd. Chief Farish closed the door and held the knob. In a twinkling, he was pushed aside. The crowd rushed into the car against his protest and in perfect indifference to his presented pistol. Sheriff Watts had a similar experience in the rear of the car. The crowd then seized the man and hustled him along with Mr. Farish outside of the car, where they bound Mr. Farish's hands. In the meantime, Mr. Watts was pleading with the mob to let the law take its course, but he was powerless in the hands of so many. As soon as James reached the platform, a rope was thrown over his head. He was carried about 40 yards to a small locust tree near the blacksmith. He was asked if he wished time to pray. He replied, "Before God, I am innocent." But when the officers pleaded with the mob to let him come to trial, he grasped at the hope thus extended and made the above declaration. The rope was thrown over a limb and about 3 inches in circumference, and James was drawn up. The limb jutted out from the tree at a sharp incline so that the rope slid downward toward the body of the tree, and when at rest, the man's body was almost touching the body of the tree. Under the tree was a bench, and his feet were only a few inches above it. As soon as he was elevated, the crowd emptied their pistols into his body, probably 40 shots entering it. When it became evident that the man was dead, the crowd dispersed, leaving his body hanging on the tree. I'm going to skip to the end here. The body of James was left hanging on the tree about 2 hours. Hundreds of people visited the scene this afternoon. Many of them gathered relics of the occasion, taking some portions of his clothing, etc. His coat was riddled with bullets. While the body hung there, number 4 passenger train passed the crossing, and the improvised gallows being in view, the passengers were forced to witness a lynching. When the mob dispersed, they came away in any direction that suited them, some coming on to the city, others returning to their homes, all with perfect indifference as to any future investigation. What does such an incident tell us about Charlottesville? What does it tell us about Virginia? What does it tell us about the nation? What does it tell us about its history? I leave this as a rhetorical question. Now, some brave people in Charlottesville advocated to have this ugly history told. And they did so at a time when the community of Charlottesville could hardly argue that the old problems of race and racism were a thing of the past. You see, back in February of 2017, the city of Charlottesville was making a change to its public history landscape. And the context of this time is important. In 2017, the nation had been engaged in several years of conversation stimulated by the prominent killings of Black people in public spaces. Over and over, in part because of the smartphone innovation, videos emerged of Black people being killed by folks in the community. And these folks were often killed by police forces, but it also could include everyday community members. And all claimed they feared for their lives in the fatal encounters. And then there was the notable massacre at Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina in June of 2015. And so a national conversation was underway about whether America cared about Black lives. And it was in this context that some members of the Charlottesville community sought to make a change to the public history environment in the city, and they had some success. In February of 2017, the Charlottesville City Council, in a 3-2 decision, voted to remove a statue of the Confederate General Robert E. Lee from a historic public park. They also voted unanimously in favor of renaming the park Emancipation Park. Neither of these changes occurred without vocal dissent from community members, some community members. And while the Lee statue was ultimately removed from the park, the new park name would not last. Now, 6 months after the February 2017 decisions, the city of Charlottesville was rocked by a prominent display of open racial hatred and violence directly connected to the public history landscape of the city. The shocking event, known as the Unite the Right rally, put a national spotlight on the city and its history. This two-day rally drew white nationalist protesters from around the nation to the city of Charlottesville on August 11th and 12th of 2017. On the first night of their arrival, the group massed about 100 people and marched across UVA's campus. They ominously burned torches and chanted racist messaging, such as "White Lives Matter" and "You will not replace us." The next day, they gathered in the hundreds. This time, they massed in Lee Park to rally and loudly protest the planned removal of the Robert Lee statue. But the group was also met by counter-protesters who had learned of the group's hateful march the previous night. As the groups clashed, the governor declared a state of emergency to restore order. In the melee, Heather Heyer was killed. She was run over by a car driven by a Unite the Right participant who intentionally targeted counter-protesters. I could say much more about this, but I only want to bring your attention to the fact that the fear and threat of a changing public history landscape in Charlottesville was a significant trigger of violent resistance. Indeed, the removal of the statue helped to stimulate existing fear in opponents. The very language, "You will not replace us," betrays this sentiment. It is a fear that the United States cannot really be a successful pluralist society. It is the idea that one can only have a successful life, a good well-being, at the expense of someone else. It is fear that clearing space for a more complicated telling of our past and present means we are somehow revealing ourselves to be a divided nation. But differences need not divide. We can diffuse the fear. We can live together in this nation and on this planet, but only if we reject the idea of living at the expense or in domination of others, and only if we are honest about who we are and how we became such. First is truth, then a chance for justice and reconciliation. The community efforts in Charlottesville and the city's establishment of the historical marker of the John Henry James lynching is a step in the right direction. Its erection in 2019 and the Lee statue's actual removal in 2021 is a step in the right direction. Both stand as testaments to brave work to confront our fear of ugliness. We will need more brave people, for we will not reach a harmonious end by sanitizing our landscapes and minds of all that is ugly. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Booth. I was almost like, oh, am I up now? I'm like engrossed. I'm seeing so many of these, the avoidance of the things, right? And I'm wondering, what are they afraid of, right? The next speaker I want to invite up here, I think is going to give us a little different perspective on this, and I love the Cottage for always bringing in psychology into all of the history work that they do. Dr. Alicia Clark is a Washington, D.C. based licensed psychologist and author of Hack Your Anxiety. Yes, please. Dr. Clark specializes in anxiety and relationships and helping people to take control of their lives. She's been named one of Washington's top doctors by Washingtonian Magazine, has served as adjunct clinical faculty at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Her presentations on stress and anxiety have been sought after by numerous professional conferences and organizations. She is a regular contributor to Psychology Today, and she has been featured in a number of media outlets, including, the Oprah magazine. What? You've been on Oprah? Okay. First for Women and the New York Times. She is also the co-CEO of Belizean Grove, a preeminent global network of influential women committed to building a collaborative, trusted partnerships. You can find Dr. Clark at AliciaClarkPSYD.com. So, Dr. Clark, you know what we're going through right now, right? We're going through a lot. We're bringing a lot with us here into this room. So she wants to help us understand how our own anxiety, what it is, and how to transform it into motivation and productive solutions. So, Dr. Clark, please help us.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Callie and Cameron and the Lincoln Cottage team for putting together this terrific ideas forum and for inviting me here to participate today. It's truly an honor to be here in this room and with all of you. Whether you call it fear, anxiety, worry, angst, conflict, panic, paranoia, or just simply stress, and there are important differences between them all, but fundamentally they're all pretty similar neurologically. Most of us wrestle with this common emotion at some point and understand how miserable it can be. But what if fear and anxiety wasn't an altogether bad thing? And you've previewed this for us, I'm so glad. That tuning into it wasn't just an exercise in misery, but an opportunity to clarify what really matters and protect the things we care about most. That taking control of anxiety boils down to how we understand it and use it to solve the threats at hand. Much like our great President Abraham Lincoln did in this very room, how cool is that? How can we better understand our experience of fear and how to use it more constructively? Today you'll learn the cliff notes of what I've learned helping people manage anxiety over the years and how you can apply it for the current landscape of fear to help. And I'm sure after that gripping description, we're all feeling pretty uncomfortable right now. And the main idea is this. What helps people cope with anxiety is not learning some new way to avoid it, but instead rethinking how we understand it and use it in our lives. That when people turn toward rather than away from anxiety, tune into its message and do something with it, that is how it diminishes. That's how it quiets. Lincoln himself seemed to understand this paradox of taking control and famously wrote, quote, "The only way to predict the future is to have power to shape the future." But what are we up against? What about when too much fear is just too much? I'm going to see if I can advance these. Oh, I went too far. Okay. So anxiety and depression, as you can see here, are on the rise. While anxiety is a normal human emotion, so is fear. The experience of too much of it can become a clinical thing. And we are seeing in our country and in our world this experience climbing. This is 2019 data where you can see 11% endorsed anxiety and depression, and then in 2021, we're up to 41%. That's an almost fourfold increase. These are, I'm advancing, okay. These are similar data. These are from 2023. The 40% incidence estimates continue. This study didn't just measure broad reports of anxiety and depression, it asked about the specific elements of the diagnostic criteria for generalized anxiety disorders. And you can see these pale green, these are all in the 40% range. These are people endorsing that over a 2-week time period, they have felt these experiences several days. These are enormous numbers. And while we don't fully understand why this is, some would look to the lingering effects of the pandemic and our psyches and mental health. And this isn't just the first time we've seen this. The 1918 Spanish flu survivors were 7 times more likely to suffer debilitating mental illness for 6 years following the pandemic's end. And our experience today is tracking likewise with an almost 3-fold increase in anxiety and depression since COVID-19 5 years before. And our anxiety was already trending up. Unsurprisingly, Chapman University confirms American fears are also on the rise and at their highest rate since Chapman University started studying them 10 years ago. These are the data that we've already been told a bit about. Americans, when it comes to fear, report fearing corrupt government officials, biological, cyber, and nuclear warfare, economic insecurity, and the suffering and death of loved ones. And while the geopolitical concerns are obvious, so are our lingering health fears. Christopher Bader, professor of sociology and the lead investigator on this project, notes that fears become a bigger and bigger part of American society and an important player in the shaping of public policy and discourse and in our current political climate. We all know this. Thanks to our built-in anxiety response, though, we're all seeing and feeling this firsthand. Whether it's geopolitical events, cultural reckonings, the planet and personal health, we are paying attention to these threats we perceive about our most precious resources and values, and we are understandably feeling the fear and anxiety that's following. We're supposed to do this. So what do? Well, we can try to let it go. I do love this picture because I do love Disney, but you can count on Disney to kind of give you a myth, a little bit, a myth that you kind of want to believe that you can let it go, but actually you can't. It doesn't work that way. We can't let go of anxiety because in order to let go of anything, we have to stop caring. The mechanism that fuels anxiety is really caring, and few of us really want to care less. Rather, it's the opposite. So maybe we try to hide from it, and we've already talked about avoiding. I do love this slide. Don't we all sort of feel like that sometimes lately? And some of our most credible voices are recommending avoiding. I know I sometimes recommend this: news diets, self-protection, distractions with other pastimes, ignoring our 401k statements, resisting engagement, too much of the news. Any way we can find to protect ourselves from the onslaught of threats and stressors that compete for our attention on any given day. And while that can work temporarily, it doesn't work forever. And anyone familiar with procrastination knows that sooner or later we have to get out from under the bed and engage in the real world one way or the other. Even Lincoln famously quoted, quote, "You cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today." When we attempt to avoid anxiety or allow ourselves to be afraid of it, like with anything else, we tend to make it worse. And this is actually how phobias form. We probably know this experience, that sometimes when we bravely face fear, it's not too hard, even doing our best, to get overwhelmed. That staying engaged can make us vulnerable to our thoughts getting carried away with dreadful possibilities and always scenarios beyond our control. This can happen when we're reading the paper, watching the news, sitting here today, this morning, talking to a friend. It's when our care response kicks up, and this is part of being human, and it's what we're supposed to do. However, the more you focus on fear, and if you let yourself be afraid of it, especially when it feels like it's out of your control, your fear will get worse, and you won't be able to use it. So in sorting through what these emotions are, it can help to understand what exactly we're dealing with. And I thought I would pull these two definitions just quickly. When we talk about fear, fear is the emotional response to a real or perceived threat. That's what we mean technically when we talk about fear. Whereas anxiety is the anticipation of that threat. And in some ways, it can be much more sinister. It combines with our intelligence, our ability to be creative and think ahead. Anxiety knows no bounds of an actual threat or an actual stressor. We can conjure it any time in our mind. And when I think of President Lincoln and his enormous legacy to our culture and our country, we have to know that he experienced fear at times, of course, but really, in modern definitions, we would say he experienced anxiety. So it's not so easy to deal with that. How do we take control, especially when we have no control? We've just said the things that are the scariest are outside of our control. Yet, as an anxiety specialist, that's exactly the first thing I would recommend you do, is to take control somewhere. And the thing that you can always do is take control of where you put your focus. So just like in the slide, you can imagine that whatever metaphorical screen you might watch is where you will take your focus. And that is an important first step in dealing with anxiety. That's perception, after all. And when we talk about perception, one of the things we can do with anxiety is to leverage it, to think about, all right, how can we reframe our perceptions? I love this slide. This slide is the Yerkes-Dodson curve. It was discovered in 1920 by two Harvard psychologists who believed that the more aroused a mouse was, the more stressed, put in danger, the more the mouse would perform in a maze. That as stress increased, so too would their performance. And they expected it to be a straight line. But what they found was, yes, it did increase performance, but after a while, too much stress, too much arousal decreased the performance. This curvilinear relationship between stress and performance is really important, not just because of what we all know, that too much is too much, but also because some is better than none. We're really looking for a moderate amount of stress and anxiety. That is actually how we perform at our best. I'm doing a better job, hopefully, talking to you right now than I would have if I was in my pajamas after a long day of relaxing. We all know this, that when we have a little bit of stress, we do better. These are a few other examples of why we don't want to let anxiety go. I'm not going to go through the details. These all have important neurological findings behind them, but anxiety is purposeful. Anxiety harnesses our focus in our brain. Anxiety delivers us important information and also the energy to do something about it, the energy to forge solutions. And if we look across species and across time, I think we can make an argument that anxiety is an important catalyst for change, learning, and growth. And this is how we adapt. So when we talk about perception, it's important to understand that also our perception can not just change how we think about anxiety, but actually change our experience of anxiety. And because of our time constraints, I'm not going to walk through each of these points, but I am going to read them for you. How we think about anxiety and distress and stress actually defines its impact on us. If we think it's unsafe, it will be. And if we think it's safe, it won't be. So there's science backing that up, which is really incredible. Also, when we change our mindset about anxiety, we perform better. That's when we can get into that zone, what psychologists called flow, sports psychologists call in the zone. And then finally, how we label anxiety actually defines how we experience it. And this is Lisa Feldman Barrett's work out of Boston about how emotions are made. And she really says that, and shows neurologically, it's a book about that thick, but it is readable, and it's one of my favorites, that how we label our experience defines it. This is helpful when we talk about taking control. So the first thing I ask people, the moment that you notice that you're experiencing fear or anxiety, is to remember you get to decide how you think about the situation. Lincoln also said, quote, if you look for bad if you look for the bad in people expecting to find it, you surely will. You also get to decide how you name that fear and anxiety. And third, you get to decide what you do with that anxiety. And again, Lincoln, I mean, this was not hard to find these quotes. It was pretty incredible. Quote, the best way to predict your future is to create it, he said. So this is the meat and the guts of what I mean by how to take control of anxiety. There's changing your perception always, but this is pretty much the method of walking through how you take anxiety from an experience into and through that process of doing something about it. And I gave a lot of thought to our core fears that we all may experience in this time period, and also what the Chapman research has told us. And what was notable was that all of those fears mostly were fears that were outside of our control, and may or may not be predictable or even reasonable. And by reasonable, I mean, what's the likelihood that it's going to happen? We are going to die, and people we love will die. Will we have a cyber attack? I don't know. I'm sort of jumping ahead for time's sake. This sorting of anxiety is really the key thing here. We recognize it, we identify it, this is how we name it, how we think about it. Then we need to sort through, is it rational or irrational what we're fearing? Resisting the wish trap, and it might be hard to read. That's, do we wish something else were the case? Are we focused on something we wish we had control over instead of focusing on what we do have control over? So this is one of the biggies that I work with almost every day is, okay, what do you have control over? Not the stuff you wish you had control over or somebody else would take care of, but what do you actually have control over? And then prioritizing what your goals are. What's the most important thing? There are a lot of things we care about. The more we care, the more anxious we are. So how do we sort them? And then how do you adjust anxiety's volume? Remember back to the Yerkes-Dodson curve. We don't want too much, but we also don't want too little. So we want to find that sweet spot when we talk about taking brave action and doing something about it. And then determining your solutions over here. This is basically a lot about what can I do, and then how do you take action? What will it take to take action? And this is excerpted from my book. It's, and the last part of the book walks through some of this in detail, and the rest of the book is a longer version of that. It's too long. So, in closing, 4 key things. Courage. When it comes to taking action, few things are more precious than bravery and courage. And while this slide might be hard to read, I kind of love it because it says not fearless, just brave. Courage can't exist without resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. Franklin Roosevelt said, courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something else is more important than that fear. Empathy. When we try to make sense of things around us that scare us or confuse us, or when we're communicating with others in times of fear and anxiety, or when we might be afraid or anxious of them, or need them. Hands down, our first line of defense is empathy. And this slide is from, I forget how you phrased her, Brene Brown. She's one of my favorites. This is from a little clip she has on YouTube that when I have more time, I actually play the 2 minutes because it's such a beautiful description of what empathy actually is. And I recommend all of you just Google Brene Brown empathy video and it will come right up. Critical to empathy is recognizing that all this really means is that we are feeling with somebody else. We're feeling with them. and we are trying to understand somebody else's experience, recognize it in them by recognizing it in ourselves, and then by communicating it. So this whole process of feeling what other people are feeling it inside of ourselves, and then communicating it is how we build connection and how we keep our networks where they need to be, how we just bridge differences, find common ground. I know we'll have speakers continue to speak about this, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but it's a key to managing anxiety. Another, gentleness. This is from a story about trapping a monkey, and I don't know if it's a myth or it actually is real, but it's used in a lot of circles. And the idea is if you want to trap a monkey, put a banana inside a hollowed out round thing, and the monkey will grab the banana and make a fist so that it can't take its paw out. And the metaphor is that in trying too hard, you entrap yourself. And this is a plea for gentleness, a plea for compassion. When you think about anxiety and fear, sometimes being really rigid with it is not going to deliver the best results. Instead, to take a moment to ask yourself, how can I be gentle? How can I think through this? And sometimes our amygdala is firing so loudly that we just need to get our thinking and our rational brain back online. And we do that by trying to calm ourselves down. And we do that by taking some of our expectations off of ourselves. So gentleness. Some of you may know this from yoga circles. When you're stuck in a stretch, how can you be more gentle to get more from the stretch? I don't know if you all know that. Lincoln also said on compassion, because he had words on almost all of this, quote, I've always found that mercy bears richer fruits than strict justice. I thought that was interesting. And then the final thing here is your mindset. This is the power of yet. This is a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. This is Carol Dweck's work, her life work, and she's really, I would say, the grandmother of positive psychology, and really highlights this whole idea of how you think about things matters, and that we're always growing, we're always changing, and recognizing that as a mindset helps us stay open and stay flexible and willing to grow. And Lincoln had a lot to say on this. He said, I do not think much of a man who is not wiser today than he was yesterday. He also said, my great concern is not whether you have failed, but whether you are content with your failure. On growth, he advised, you have to do your own growing no matter how tall your grandfather was. I kind of love that one. And about his own path and growth, he said, I'm a slow walker, but I never walk back. So we're growing. Remember, anxiety and fear are catalysts to growth. And when we're freaked out and not so sure about that, try to take the long view. When fears feel too challenging, anxiety too great, try to change your perspective. Focus on what you can control and consider the longer view. As a country, we've been in dangerous crossroads before, and we've come out stronger, and hopefully we'll do that, continue to do that more and more. And in closing, Lincoln said, the best thing about the future is that it comes one day at a time. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Dr. Clark. I actually want to ask you a quick question, because you talked about going through these steps of figuring out, and sorting through our anxieties. And you also talked about empathy. So the sorting exercise I'm really curious about, because isn't it one of the hardest things to know if our anxiety is rational or irrational? Because we oftentimes think other people's fears are irrational, right? But we don't think ours are. So how do you advise people to kind of sort through whether they're rational or not?
Well, dealing with actually asking people. I mean, it's an opportunity for connection. Asking people that you trust around you, and then researching. I'll say, okay, if you're afraid to get in a plane, what's the likelihood that the plane is going to crash? Like, go figure that out. It's actually more dangerous to cross the street than to get in a plane.
So if somebody is afraid to get on a plane, what you shouldn't say is, that's ridiculous.
Precisely.
It's not going to crash.
Is it probable or is it possible? So to focus on the probabilities rather than the possibilities.
I mean, I know I'm guilty of this. I have outright laughed in people's faces when they've told me things that they have anxiety about, and I'm like, oh wait, hold on. That's not helpful, right? That just kind of like it makes them have shame about whatever they're feeling. So yeah, thank you for there's another.
Yeah. There wasn't
Lincoln
enough
Ideas
time.
Forum 2026. Shame. Okay. So I want to, before we do our next speaker, I want to invite people to just get up and stretch your legs. And if you want to be back in, 5 to 7 minutes, just a quickie little break, and we'll be back. Okay, so our next speaker, someone who I've been stalking online, I have to tell you. I don't mean to make you uncomfortable at all. Just fangirling a little bit. Her name is Jessie Manisto. She is the director of debates for an organization called Braver Angels, which is a volunteer-driven organization dedicated to bridging partisan divides and strengthening our democratic republic. You're not needed at all right now. She came to Braver Angels as a volunteer after being canceled by friends for disagreeing with some of their political views, an experience that led her to seek a space where she could, in the words of the Braver Angels way, quote, speak freely and fully without fear. Very appropriate. Now she works to cultivate such a space for others, regardless of their beliefs. She also trains Braver Angels members to chair their own debates. One major part of this is mastering our own responses to fear and anger so that we can support others in doing the same. Learning from those emotions and what they're trying to tell us and using this information constructively. Wow, it's all just fitting together. Whoever planned this program, thank you, Cameron. Good job. So before joining Braver Angels, Jessie served as a leadership analyst at the Central Intelligence Agency. I believe that's called the CIA. Focusing on Eastern Europe. She's also the founder and editor emerita of Third Factor, which is a magazine and membership community for creative and intellectually excitable people, striving to develop and live their values. She is a native of Detroit, Michigan. Okay, so Jessie, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say because I'm convinced that if we face our fears of talking to people that are not like ourselves, that our country has a real chance. So help us talk to our crazy uncles, please.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you, everyone. It is a real privilege to be here and to speak after two such thought-provoking speeches. And yeah, no, you don't realize yet how perfect this is because my speech also briefly, you set the stage for Charlottesville and what happened there. That is part of my story as well, as is the pandemic and the anxiety that has created. So yes, the Braver Angels way. We state our views freely and fully without fear. That is the first line of it. Yeah, relevant today. Let me start off by reading the whole thing. This is a little bit like our Pledge of Allegiance. It's sort of a code. Our statement of values, we start every Braver Angels national debate with it. If you ever want to join them, they're online. We do some locally in DC as well. The Braver Angels way. We state our views freely and fully without fear. We treat people who disagree with us with honesty, dignity, and respect. We welcome opportunities to engage with those with whom we disagree. We believe all of us have blind spots, and none of us are not worth talking to. We seek to disagree accurately, avoiding exaggeration and stereotypes. We look for common ground where it exists, and, if possible, find ways to work together. We believe that in disagreements, both sides share and learn. In Braver Angels, neither side is teaching the other or giving feedback on how to think or say things differently. That is the Braver Angels way. So, as mentioned, I've been canceled. I know that's, put that in scare quotes, but it happens, right? Rejection, being thrown out, having your views questioned, being seen as, the traitor within, honestly. We talk about red and blue in Braver Angels. Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives. We say red and blue because not everyone affiliates with those, but that's the rough divide. And I'm also going to say that intra-red and intra-blue is very salient right now, too. We do those debates as well. Some of those are the most contentious views because you can be seen as the traitor. Though now, we could argue, we can make a good case for either these days being the most contentious. But yeah, back in the day, back when what happened in Charlottesville was going on, I was a member of a group called the Democratic Socialists of America, very much of the left, where intra-left discussions were extremely salient. And one of the divides that happened, all right, so go back to 2013. This was before the Bernie Sanders campaign, which brought the word socialism into, let's say like revamping it a little for a new generation. Before that, if you were a socialist, if you were calling yourself that in this country, you had to be asking for the benefit of the doubt because everyone would look at you and be like, have you heard of this thing called the Soviet Union? Are you for gulags, right? And those people are like, hold on, give me a chance. I loved those people because politically I'm very much a populist. I couldn't quite bring myself to vote for Donald Trump, but I relate to the fears of the Trump voters. Those resonated with me. There's a little, like the Bernie to Trump phenomenon is real. It's an interesting group to look at. Those people might be subject to cancellation, but neither side wants them. I'm going to tell you about a story like that. When I joined this old school DSA group, gritty union organizers, right? They had been carrying the flag for a long time. And then when the first Trump election happened, there was a wave of young people rushing into DSA. And so there was this generational clash. And one of the old school union organizers who had also organized public sector unions, which includes police unions. Do you see where this is going? Intra-left clashes. The young people came in and said, what? Defund the police. You are a traitor. The old school guy, the union organizer, got voted into leadership, and then the young people said no, and they drove him out after he was elected, and it was brutal, and people were afraid to speak, and I, foolhardy person that I am, who's like, let's speak freely and fully without fear. I was like, no, he's great. He's talking about a way to get into police departments and talk to them about what's going on. Like, he could be a bridge. I thought that was really cool. That's why I work for Braver Angels now. Didn't know Braver Angels at the time. Well, a lot of people got mad at me for that too. That's what I refer to as the time I was canceled. Lots of bad feelings going around. I'll let you imagine it. Suffice it to say, I could have become a very bitter, fearful person. And I was bitter and fearful for a while. Fortunately, I found Braver Angels right when I needed it. And, it was a place for me to go in and feel belonging to a group that wanted to talk about this. Very much like all of you in the room here. This is a thing we need to process. And so Braver Angels, that's one of the things we offer. The fear of rejection, though, right? We said that was an aspirational line. We state our views freely and fully without fear. Do we always live up to that? No. It's really hard sometimes. Sometimes we we will find out that a debate or a workshop went really well. Like, yeah, people felt really good about it. Like, everyone was speaking courageously, and I'm like, I know someone there who was scared and didn't say what was on their mind. And I take that as feedback, and I hope my fellow debate organizers do as well. Like, we knew that voice was in the room, and it didn't quite get spoken. Because, as Andrea said right at the beginning, you can tell them, oh yeah, just don't be afraid. But look, I get it, I was there. You can say what you think needs to be said, and that doesn't mean people are ready to hear it, and they might be mad. And fear underlies all of this, as we've been discussing, right? There's a lot of tangled up fears here. And sorting out that knot is the challenge that we need to face right now in this time we're in. Now, I want to bring up another set of principles or a guideline or ideas that I like that I want to give to you that kind of runs through my presentation. Socrates had 3 requirements for ethical and effective communication in pursuit of the good and true, right? Knowledge, goodwill, and fearless speech, parrhesia. If you've, the Greek word among nerds is like a buzzword, right? I love it, parrhesia, fearless speech. The aspiration that we try to make space for at Braver Angels that we don't always get to. So, knowledge, goodwill, and fearless speech. I'll come back to those. First, it bears stating for the record that as the director of debates, I am pro-debate. I think, yes, we should debate. Is there anything I think we shouldn't debate? We can talk about that, but I would say pretty much no. If we're talking about it in the United States, it is the subject for a debate. I want to go back to just, thinking about various red and blue objections to debate and different parts of the red and blue landscape. I'm going to just sketch some general responses that I've heard. So there are people who will say, like, no debate, hashtag no debate is a thing, which obviously I noted that after I went through the intra-left struggles that I did. To that, I would say, identity, your racial, your gender, your any sort of identity question, I feel very much like I want to participate in discussions about the role of women and what makes women happy. I am inspired, even though I am a white person, by the Baldwin-Buckley debates, where James Baldwin debated William F. Buckley at Cambridge in 1965. Resolved, the American dream is at the expense of the American Negro. And it's a legend, right? Like, that kind of thing I see over and over, where someone stands up and says, yeah, I will debate you. I'm not going to say it's going to debase me. You could. There could be a legit claim to that. But I see that over and over on both sides. Someone saying, nope, I will stand and I will demand your respect and I will make my case. So that inspires me. I think about that often. Then there are people who will say, why would you debate? That just polarizes us. Aren't you a depolarization organization? And I will make you pick a side. We have a resolution, and you can be affirmative or negative, and people will come in and say, well, it's really very nuanced. I'm like, yes, of course it is, and you can add all the caveats you want, but I'm going to make you pick a side, just so we see, sometimes you got to choose things in life. Don't give me this analysis paralysis. We have to decide policy. So I make them pick. But that actually makes it easier to see that there is a lot of common ground because people on either side of the resolution are finding things to agree about. And that is also a very inspiring thing to see. So those are roughly criticisms that I will hear from the blues. From the reds, for some of the very highly educated young conservative professionals in DC, something interesting I've seen is they want to have debates with each other to refine their conservative principles. They don't want to talk to the liberals. They're like, screw those guys. I don't care what they think. They're going to go live their crummy lives, and we are the real aristocrats. So that's something I've heard. I've heard it from blues as well, but I'm being general here. But most importantly at all, I think for our current moment, are the people who are, again, our quintessential pro-Trump populist who will be like, you got your fancy degrees, you're looking down on us, the working class, you think you're better than us. Just because you were in a fancy debate program and you think you can win rhetorically, that doesn't mean my feelings don't matter. my feelings matter too, darn it. And so one of the things I will say when I set up a Braver Angels debate, before we start, and we're telling people how this works. There are no winners or losers. That's not the point of a Braver Angels debate. Some of the best speeches, I will also tell them, they'll be worried. They're like, well, I didn't prepare anything. It's okay. Some of the most compelling speeches are the ones when someone just stands up and thinks through something on the floor, haltingly, going, filler. I know they teach you in like the polished debate circles, don't do that. But a person who's standing there and you can see that they're afraid, but they're trying anyway, those people have an impact. Those people are moving. And so I always try to encourage them. It takes, again, speak freely and fully without fear. You have to push through the fear to do it. But when you do, you have an impact because we see that it matters. You can persuade people in a Braver Angels debate, but that is not the goal. The goal of a Braver Angels debate is to hear and to be heard, to speak freely and fully, and to listen to others as they do the same. So there is, however, something to fear here, isn't there? I'm going to pause. There are, we get some criticisms here. So I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure the fears come out? Are you sure this couldn't go badly? Like, well, I can't guarantee it because we can't control everything in life. That is, as we've been discussing. So are there topics that are off limits? As I said, not really. If you really want to have that tangent, we can discuss it, bring it up in the conversation afterward. But like, let's think of something that could be really horrible and that I'd be like, oh crap, we're going there right now. Let's say genocide. Is anyone really for genocide? Maybe. I mean, it's happened, right? So I can't say that someone couldn't come in and make this argument. But that one is actually fairly easy for me. I don't lose sleep over that because I'm pretty sure most people in the room in modern US times would stand up and be like, you know what, I actually don't think we should exterminate anybody, any race of people from the earth just because of that. I feel confident about that one. Maybe some of you have reason to fear, I know, I understand. But fear, we can't question people's fear in that way. But there's one that I think you'll agree at least is relatively more salient right now. And that is when we get into issues of misinformation, facts, like your facts, those are not true. I get this all the time. Why don't you fact check these debates? That was misinformation. And I will say when I am the chair, the minute I do that, I cede the neutrality of my floor. And that makes it even scarier for people to say what they, freely and fully, what they believe. And that's what I want you to take away from my debates. I am not here to be the arbiter of truth. I'm not better at that than anyone who's participating. I will say, the chair, I got asked the question, what if someone said the moon is made of cheese? Are you just going to let that stand? I would say, the chair will smile upon further speeches on the lactose content of the moon. You guys stand up and say, I don't think that's true. Here's what I think is true. Because then you understand at least where the other people are coming from. And so is it misinformation or is it like what I would call a very consequential interpretation of information that maybe not everyone is as trained to interpret, and we need to trust experts and we need to understand where this comes from. So how does our debate program play into that? Because I'm going to tell you a story. In February of this year, we started a series on President Trump's first 100 days in office, discussing all the things that are going on. And we started it with a very broad resolution. Resolved, America needs the changes that President Trump and his administration promise. Very wide, right? Anyone, you could bring anything in. We had a lot about Doge, whatever. But one woman came in who was an anti-vaxxer. She talked later about her experience on her podcast. And she said, when she first heard about Braver Angels, she thought, that's a bunch of Democrats. Those people don't like me. Why would I want to join that? And then, some years pass, and she has a friend says, oh, I got to tell you about this organization that's doing really good work. You'd like them. It's called Braver Angels. Those bunch of Democrats? What? Like, those people are mean to me, but I trust you, right? Trusted interlocutor, credible messenger. And so she says, okay, I'm going to try it out. She goes to the website, she finds the resolution that is phrased in a red-friendly affirmative, which can make it a little easier. Always give the affirmative to someone who you feel might be more scared. And she signed up. And I wrote down what she said on the podcast to read to you here. She said, in the days leading up to this debate, I have rarely felt as nervous. I do care what people think of me. And to be given questions after I spoke, it was really scary. 2 days before I spoke, I was shaking in my boots. I just about threw up. I don't like to be on camera with my tube in my nose, because she has a breathing tube, and we did see that on the Zoom-based debate. But then she spoke. She was a highlight. And she said, I'm so happy to say that everyone was kind. Everyone was gracious, from the moderators to the jazz-handed participants. On Zoom, that's how you give applause, right? Jazz hands. So there she was, getting jazz hands from a bunch of people who probably didn't agree with her, right? Here I am. I usually, as a moderator, I won't give you my view. I am not anti-vax, and I found her very sympathetic, right? She is one of those people who has a vaccine-induced injury. And all the experts will tell you, like, that's a thing, right? That really does happen. Now, how often does it happen versus, what the vaccine is designed to prevent? That's the question. But she legitimately has one. And that's why she's an anti-vaxxer. And just hearing her story made it helped make sense of why there is this fear and questioning on the other side. And just understanding other people's fear takes it down a notch. Instead of reacting to each other's fear and feeling a threat, you come a little closer, like, oh, okay, we're gonna understand each other. Even if we're not gonna persuade each other, that's not the point. That is a success for a Braver Angels debate. Not winning or losing, not persuading, but understanding. And helping one person who decided to plow through that fear and speak freely and fully feel like there is a reason to doing that. When I do that, I will have a place that I belong. That's what I want to create for people. And it wasn't just me, right? This was a room with there were 500 participants in 2 rooms, so 250 people in a Zoom room responding positively to this woman. Now, I do want to acknowledge, touchy-feely, yay, people feel happy. Somebody might come in and say, like, yeah, but people are dying of measles now, and that's a problem too. That's a thing to be terrified of as well. We have on our, so we're a volunteer-based organization, as I said, or as Andrea introduced us as, and we have a volunteer group that helps us put on these national debates. And one of the members is a medical doctor. And she's like, look, I just can't do a debate about Make America Healthy Again. It just drives me crazy because you put out misinformation, and then like every bit of misinformation that is put out there takes 6 times as much energy. She had an actual number, and now I can't remember exactly, but to correct it, right? You're always chasing the misinformation. Of course, if you are someone who has dedicated yourself to the pursuit of a certain truth in your area of expertise, of course that's going to drive you up the wall. And here I am being like, yeah, come in, just tell us your story, tell us how you feel. So these things are understandably in tension, and I want to respect that. And so, given that we're here in conversation with each other, I want to give you some thoughts that I'm thinking about, and I'd love to hear what you think, because I'm not going to sit here and pretend I have answers. I'm just going to speak to the tension. The first is this inability to counter misinformation. We have to figure out what the best way to confront this is. We have the internet now. Anyone can speak. That genie is not going back in the bottle. So how are we going to respond to that? And I think a lot of our fear is related to the fact that we just don't have the wisdom and expertise and knowledge of generations on how to handle that. And I like to think our debate program is at least experimenting with a way to do that. Then, something else important to me. when I was a volunteer kind of scoping out Brave Angels to see if this was worth my time, is this just coming together to sing Kumbaya, is anything really going to happen here that's worth my time? Someone said something on a panel that I found extremely relevant, and that is that there will always be winners and losers in politics. Braver Angels isn't here to find the middle ground. My goodness, if we all just came to that point and we all found our interests aligning, everything will be fine. We're never going to do that. What we have to learn is how to get along and stay as belonging members of American society, of your state, of your town, given that there will always be winners or losers. And how do we respond to that? And how do we make sure that everyone at least was represented and at least they felt heard, like they're bought into the process? So there will always be winners and losers in policy, differences of values. How do we work with that? Something else to consider, because I just talked about anti-vaxxers and a doctor who was concerned about misinformation. Public health. I have no expertise on public health. I am a member of the public who has health or is concerned about it. That is the limit of my expertise. But yeah, the pandemic, as Dr. Clark was saying, like that has made us all nervous wrecks, and the effects clearly are lingering. So if trust fell in expertise and fear rose, what are we going to do? How do we respond to that? And how is that related to the internet, where we can all go out and go like, and the algorithms feed off of that. Just as we feed off of each other's nervous systems, the algorithms do too, right? And someone's making money off of that. So I also just throw out this observation. And I thought about this, and I stuck it in at the last minute because it struck me. Remember the trolley problem from like your high school or your college philosophy class, right? There's like 5 people on the track, and the trolley is coming, and if you pull the lever, the trolley will divert, but it will hit one person. So you can be passive. You're not responsible, or are you responsible, if those 5 people get hit? But if you pull the lever, you actively killed that person. You did it to save 5 people. Would you pull the lever? And undergrads just like stay up late and like argue with each other and annoy each other and make memes with this, but it's a real problem. And I thought about that with my new friend, the anti-vaxxer. How many people would have to be on the track for you to pull the lever? And I realized she's the person on the track. She is the uncommon but real person who got a vaccine injury. Does it have to be 100,000 people? Like, I don't know. We'd have to think about that. And so given that that is the world that we live in, that is reality, yeah, we need fear. Fear will always have to be with us because of the nature of the world and the trade-offs. So how do we confront this? How do we talk about this, given that that is the case, given that trust and expertise is falling? Well, I'm very excited to tell you, as a member of Braver Angels, that both Francis Collins and Jay Bhattacharya are Braver Angels members. You don't know if you know who they are, the 16th director of the NIH and the 18th director of the NIH, one of whom led the response to the pandemic, and the other questioned it and now is leading the NIH. So they came in and talked to us. Francis Collins was just on PBS NewsHour last week with his buddy Will Wilkinson, who is one of the leaders of our organization, just a volunteer leader, talking about what Francis Collins asked this truck driver, what could we have done better? And he was humble, and he recognized the role of people's fear and just the complexity of these situations and the problems at hand. So let's keep talking. Let's keep trying to understand how fear is driving us. All kinds of fears, right? Like there are all kinds of fears tangled up in knots there. So in the end, this is something I put forward to you. We have to face these fears. And we have to recognize the impact on our bodies, physiological, like I was alluding to, right? And like Dr. Clark talked about, the aroused stress response that triggers then fear in other people. It is contagious. And so when we're teaching people to chair debates, for a novice chair, someone gets agitated and then you're flooded, right? You have to all right, I believe in myself. I have confidence. That person might get mad at me, but it's okay. It won't kill me if someone's mad at me. But at the same time, I also have to, respect them and honor them, because otherwise I'm not meeting my goal. And it's a very wobbly sort of place to stand. What you're learning is how to balance between those competing fears. And the only way you can do it is to practice, which means you've got to do it and then mess up and have someone be mad at you and see that you survived and see that they survived and hope that they come back. So I really strongly encourage anyone who is nervous, who is shy. They think, oh no, you guys who are chairs, you're a natural. Like, no. I just really needed this. After what happened when I was in DSA, I needed this. You can learn this. If you're struggling with anxiety in response to the situation right now, come to Brave Rangers. We'll teach you how to chair a debate, and maybe you can feel like you're doing something to help. I will end with saying, bringing up one final big question, the issue of platforming, right? Like my friend the doctor said, you're platforming misinformation. I don't care about your funny line about moon cheese, right? Like, what are you going to do? This is really important, and people will die if they don't have good information. But I tend to think that because that genie is out of the bottle, that bringing people together who wouldn't hear each other is the right answer. It is the antidote. The platform is out there. And if you reject someone like my friend, the anti-vaxxer, if you reject her, she's going to go just talk to other people who agree with her, and everyone who hates them are just going to talk to each other, and they're going to spin themselves into more animosity instead of saying, wait a minute, why? Like, can I do anything to address this? Can I admit that I pulled the lever and I would do it again, but talk to you about why? And then hear how that impacted you. I hear over and over, including from people who are just like, oh my God, I can't even with what's going on right now. And then they do something like volunteer to edit our videos, to make them little catchy clips, because our debates are 2 hours long. Like, that's not going to get you a TikTok reel. But so we get people to edit them, and I got the nicest comment from someone who I really thought was not going to go there, who was really angry at what's going on. And he said, the more I listened to those people speak, the more I felt like I could articulate their views, the less upset I got. I'm still horrified at what's going on, but the fear went down because we're all Americans in this together. And so, I want to make a place where that woman who got hit by the trolley feels safe to say that it sucked. And I want to find a place, she's alive. So, but I also want the place where people with the complementary fear can come in and be like, we have to make the choices that we have to make. And they can sit together, hear each other. I've seen it work. It's like, dare I say, the team of rivals of President Lincoln. And we know how much that helped him get through another great crisis of this country, the worse than we're facing now, where this country was threatened with being torn into. And it feels that way again today. But let's make space. Let's make a space where everyone feels like they belong. No matter how wrong we may think they are, they still belong. They're still Americans. They have fear for a reason. Let them speak freely and fully without fear, and maybe they will let you do the same. And maybe that's the first step forward. I know there are more after that, but it is a first step. And with that, I yield the rest of my time for discussion. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessie. Now I know much more about what you do, so this is great. When I first introduced you, I said, help us talk to our crazy uncles, right? And I thought about, so how do we take this and apply it to our personal lives and talk to people? But then it occurred to me that really what you're doing is providing a safe container for those feelings, right? It's not the same to just talk at the dinner table randomly about these things. And, also looking back, what Dr. Clark is talking about in keeping our anxieties at a simmer, not turning it up too hot. So creating those, like, I guess, that's what we call them in facilitation, is a container, you know, like where you have certain rules, you know it's going to last a certain amount of time. You have rules? Do you have what are the rules?
Oh, absolutely. You always address the chair is our
Right.
most famous rule.
Yeah.
Balance of affirmative and negative speeches.
Yeah.
And but never you talk about ideas, not people.
Uh-huh.
And keep it impersonal. That's why you address the chair. Madam Chair, did the speaker really mean to say that? Does the speaker truly
Right.
think that? And that allows us to turn the temperature up a little more.
So there's a little bit of space
Yes.
that you're allowed. Yeah, those kinds of things are really helpful. Therapy is a container, right? Or you're going to a place where the rules of engagement are clear. You know where to go if you can't be there anymore, and those kinds of things. And it makes me wonder if, what would happen if in Charlotte, if people had just had a container to talk about, we're going to, this is the city council, here are some citizens with opposite, just to kind of create those spaces. So I really take what you're saying as a thing that we can apply to different situations. Okay, our last speaker today is a man named Sergeant Aquilino Gonell. So Sergeant Aquilino Gonell was born in Dominican Republic. And you have an amazing life story. I don't hope I'm not ruining your talk by.
No, go ahead.
Okay, okay. Everyone, sit down and let me tell you a story. So Sergeant Gonell immigrated to the United States as a boy. He spoke no English and was unprepared for the dangers of his new life in Brooklyn. He worked hard to give back to the country that took him in and offered him the opportunities to thrive. Sergeant Gonell's patriotism led him to join the U.S. Army. And shortly after that, because he wasn't known as sergeant as a boy, I just want to clarify that. And shortly after
In
that,
my head, they did.
he deployed to Iraq for 545 days. He witnessed the horrors of war firsthand, and upon his return, he was diagnosed with PTSD. Back in the States, he continued his education. He pursued and landed a job with the U.S. Capitol Police. He'd achieved the American dream. When Sergeant Gonell kissed his wife and son goodbye and went to work on the morning of January 6th, 2021, he didn't expect that he might never see them again. As an angry mob of insurrectionists goaded by the losing president, intent on remaining in power by force, descended upon the Capitol complex, Sergeant Gonell put his life on the line to protect everyone inside America's most sacred democratic institution. Sergeant Gonell continues to be an advocate for democracy and public safety, often sharing his experiences as he is today, and perspectives on the challenges faced by law enforcement officers and veterans, to the public, elected officials, the media, and the courts. He remains active in community engagement and participates in discussions and initiatives aimed at improving the relationship between law enforcement and the communities they serve. Sergeant Gonell has been featured on ABC, CBS, CNN, Telemundo, Univision, NPR, and the New York Times, Washington Post, and El Diario. He is a recipient of the Congressional Gold Medal and Presidential Citizens Medal. You can find Sergeant Gonell at aquilinogonell.com. Whew, Sergeant Gonell, we are so grateful to have you here to share your remarkable story and to help us understand how we can face our own fears. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, first of all. Going to watch a video in the background about my heroic.
Sorry, it's lunchtime now, so they play the service songs.
Oh, I thought it was because I got up here. The previous speakers, I'm sorry. Thank you for having me, the Lincoln Cottage and the personnel here, Cameron and I forgot, sorry. But thank you. The previous speakers, they spoke about what was done in the name of fear, how to cope with fear, and understanding fear. And I'm here to tell you what I did when I faced those fears that I experienced throughout my life. And I'm going to begin with the quote. I'm going to begin with saying my name is Sergeant Aquilino Gonell. I'm a former United States Army. I'm a veteran. I went to war. Former United States Capitol Police Sergeant, and I'm a published author. The name of the book is American Shield, the Immigrant Sergeant Who Defended Democracy. And I want to begin with a quote that says, is written by American writer Mark Twain. He said, I lived through some terrible things in my life, some of them which actually happened. I can relate to that quote because from the beginning of my life, I have been finding myself in historical moments. From the time that I was a little kid, a baby, in the Dominican Republic when Hurricane David landed in the Dominican Republic, that hurricane nearly killed me when a piece of galvanized metal sheet landed right next to me and almost killed me. I was a month old. That storm, the devastation ravaged the whole country, especially in the region in my area. Nearly 2,000 people died. And my family, when my dad not around, he was living here in the United States. My family, my mom, and my other relatives, we were trying to survive the aftermath. So I learned how to be resilient and persevere at an early age. And growing up, the last thing I ever wanted to be was a troublemaker. My grandparents taught me to keep quiet. I listened to when my grandfather, Bienvenido, my mom's father, told me, speak only when you are spoken to. He had 13 kids and 8 grandkids. I wasn't his favorite. But to win him over, I said, si, senor, and fed the animal, all the animals in his fruit and vegetable farm where we lived. Mom was a maid at a well-off family, then sold fried food on a bus stop on the main street in town. I carried wood to the fire pit and babysat my siblings as a kid. All I ever wanted to do was be helpful and someone my family will be proud of. Never tell lies, said my older grandfather, Fillo. Although he has 7 kids and 4 grandkids, he treated me special, not so his wife. When I was 10, a neighbor came in and said to her, can I buy some food from you? And my grandmother said no. And knowing that we did, I said, yes, we do, Nana. She turned around and smacked me right in my mouth. Later, she yelled at me, shut up, nobody speaking to you. She owes money, don't contradict me. If you want to ask, keep your mouth closed. Afraid to go against those with authority, I learned a lesson. Let others do the talking. Although my folks separated weeks after my birth and my dad living in America, he resurfaced when I was 12. He wanted to be a family again and pay for Mom, my brother Tony, and me to join him in Brooklyn, New York. I was excited and fearful at the same time to live with both my parents and move to the States. but it wasn't as easy as I expected. I dreaded the need to learn a new language, a new culture, and but most, I feel leaving behind my two siblings and my other relatives. From there, things got worse. 2 weeks after my arrival in this uncharted land, my dad was mugged and shot in the middle of the night as I returned home from work, as he returned home from working. I feared for his life and losing him before I getting to know him. My dad was a very frugal cab driver in New York and busy working all the time. As he recovered, I worked as a stock boy at a bodega and selling mom's fried food door to door, using the little bit of broken English that I knew. Beef patty, $1, $1, I used to say. I gave my parents most of the cash that I made, although not all. One morning, seeing my flashy new Nikes, my dad asked, "What's wrong with the shoes that I got you?" His shoes were from Payless, uncomfortable and not my style. I felt ashamed. His first rule was be modest and blend in. 2 years later, my dad's approach failed him again. He was knifed in his stomach and robbed of his possessions by a patron in his taxi. The second incident was worse than the first and left him in a coma for several weeks, and me wanting to return to my old life in the Dominican Republic. I begged my grandfather to let me stay with him after telling him how hard and frightening my life in America was. In the end, he convinced me to give America another chance, and I did. That was hard without speaking the language well. My accent, my heavy accent, I struggled pronouncing V as a B, saying Betty instead of very. My teacher wasn't sympathetic. Once, when I asked to repeat a word I missed, they gave me detention for being disrupted. I didn't want to disrupt anyone, so I stopped raising my hand. As a minority student and an immigrant, I couldn't risk calling attention to myself. I lived with the constant fear that something I say or do would get us deported. Staying seen but not heard proved to be a good strategy. Unfortunately, our current president and his policy have brought that fear to the forefront again for me and thousands of other immigrants who thought the United States of America was the land of opportunity to achieve our dreams or a safe haven from cruelty, atrocities, and the ever-changing power struggle of those with power and the powerless. We all have seen the news. Cruelty is the point. For 16 years, when ordered to check ID, I checked. When I was sent to guard dignitaries' arrivals, I guarded them. I was cautious and careful as I moved up the rank, rarely challenging the high-ups. Although police union nationwide endorsed Donald Trump in 2016, Trump didn't have my vote. But I kept my views to myself, reminding my squad we protect everyone equally. When he won the presidency, I feared being targeted, traveling with my young son, whose English was better than mine, still is. I noticed condescending stares as if strangers found me less American for speaking Spanish, or the wrong kind of foreigner, unlike Melania Trump's white Slovenian parents who were naturalized through the same kind of chain migration her husband vehemently denounces. But silence, the blueprint I rely on, became impossible on January 6, 2021. On that day, I was attacked while defending the Capitol against an invasion by tens of thousands of native-born citizens in a barbaric mob of rioters who just had marched from the White House. Swarms of assailants beat me and my colleagues with poles, sticks, broken pipes, and anything that they could grab their hands on, makeshift weapons of opportunities. It was worse than the combat that I seen in Iraq. Not because it was how deadly it was, but because it was constant, and it went for hours and hours, fighting with more than 40 rioters attacking me alone. They assaulted me as I tried to hold the police line inside the tunnel of the Capitol where the president comes and exits to be sworn in as president. Exhausted by hours of torture, bloody from the fending off multiple rioters, I was called un-American and a traitor who broke his oath, who deserved to be executed. Trampled from both sides, I feared for my life and thought, this is how I'm going to die. 9 people ended up dead. I was badly wounded, that even after 2 surgeries, I wasn't sure I could ever take the job back or take the lieutenant promotion I strive for. Instead of denouncing the siege and upholding the law, almost all Republican elected officials I risked my life for to shield did the unthinkable. They defended the former president and his insurrectionists, claiming that the violent uprising by armed militia was a legitimate public discourse, a peaceful protest conducted by patriots. And whether you see them as patriots, hostages, warriors, who were they fighting against? They were fighting the police, the same people they claimed to have supported. As a public servant for 2 decades, I was horrified to hear the invaders painted as victims and felt compelled to tell my story. But my wife was petrified that Trump's influence could harm our family, so I kept my mouth shut for as long as I could, heeding my wife's safety concerns. I waited for the Republican leaders, Lindsey Graham, Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, and Marco Rubio, people who I have met and protected, to condemn the revolt. yet they refuse to blame our lawless ex-president for causing this historic tragedy. Instead of condemning the attack, they condone it by not denouncing it. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The time is always right to do the right thing, yet Republicans are more fearful of losing their position of power than doing the right thing for our country, for our democracy." They fail miserably to meet the moment. These are the same individuals who run in fear for their lives from those who were trying to give us hugs and kisses during the day of love, while we were, myself and my colleagues, fought for our lives to give them a chance to escape. After keeping quiet for decades, I lost it. I couldn't believe what cowards these politicians were. Shocked, I told my wife, they pretend to support the law enforcement officers while covering up what happened for their own political gain. My faith in the U.S. justice system capsized. I would put everything on the line as a soldier and as a policeman to defend our democracy. I recall the saying from John F. Kennedy, "All it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." And the advice from activist and Congressman John Lewis to get into good trouble. I could no longer stay silent, and that's why I'm here today. An American proud of the service that I made for our nation. Even though I wasn't born here, I deserve a voice. To hell with not being disrupted, I left my comfort zone. I was going public. On July 27, 2021, I raised my right hand on the oath and attested my experience on the January 6th committee in Congress. Colonel David Hawkworth said, "Bravery is being the only one who knows you are afraid." Boy, was I afraid. But I piled through. Speaking out on camera or in public was something I shy away like a plague. But then I realized that my fear during the attack in the tunnel was bigger, and that telling what I witnessed, what I endured, was of historical proportion that the American people needed to hear. I gave my first public interview about the Capitol attack. It was draining to relive terrifying trauma, as you can see on the screen. Trauma that haunted me, but afterwards, an immense weight lifted. I was risking my job and my security for my family, but the truth was more important to me. At 41, I left my comfort zone and spoke out to my bosses, to the district attorneys, to the FBI, before Congress, and the media. I blew up every whistle, testified to each the horror I saw, and call out all the injustices I witnessed, regardless of whether the liar taunted me, outnumbered me, or outranked me. I was betrayed by the President of the United States, who only outreach to us, the Capitol Police officers, was to call us pussies as we testify. But he's the biggest supporter of police, according to him. He also will go on to pardon those who say insurrectionists as soon as he came back to office 4 years later, while calling them unjustly mistreated people and refers to us, the police, as thugs. Remember these warriors recorded themselves assaulting police officers who were performing their duties. Many of the same officers he called thugs protected him during his second inauguration. Yet, minutes later, he pardoned those who attack us. Today, many of our fellow citizens have stayed quiet, in my opinion. Politicians as well. On the sideline, hoping that somebody else stand up to his dismantling of norms. These blatant attacks on our constitutions and freedoms. Being unempathetic to other people's problems is not a good strategy. General George S. Patton said, "It's better to fight for something than live for nothing." Not defending our principles and value or standing up to injustices because you hope it won't affect you is not only unpatriotic, but it is also un-American. That's what had led us to be where we are now, filled with uncertainty, anger, fear for our future. This is not about being a Democrat or Republican. It's about being an American and fighting for what's right. I used to be obedient, scared little boy, but that's gone. I have found my voice despite speaking English with a thick accent, as you can see, and being seen as unmanly because I cry on national TV after testifying about what I endure, ironically at the hands of those who claim to support the police, law and order, and the rule of law. I embraced my thick accent as a way, as my superpower, Make fun of myself sometimes. Because it helps me avoid conflict. I shy away from it, Okay, you think I don't speak English well properly. I know 2 languages, you only know 1. I'm sorry, that makes me the less? Okay. But, regardless how you see me, hero, villains, I don't consider them. I would just simply do my job. And at the end of the day, I still got to go home, play with my kid, take out the trash, do the dishes, But, I use that as my power. I stopped being afraid. And I think we need to stop being afraid, honestly. That's the message I would like to live here with you today, here at the Lincoln Cottage. In these unprecedented moments, we cannot be afraid in the face of fear. We can let threats, intimidation, and harassment make us fearful of doing the right thing. If you see injustice, call it out. Strength in numbers. They want to divide us one way or the other, by gender, by race, segregating us, make us afraid of each other. And I think as Americans, we have more in common than to bring us together than separate us. We need to be brave. We must channel the fear into a bigger purpose to do what's right, to hear the call to serve in any way we can, to stand in the breach, to speak truth to power for ourselves, for each other, and for our country. And the last thing I want to leave you with is to conclude, it costs you nothing to speak up, but remaining silent could cost you everything. And I think that's where we need to do today. So thank you for having me here. So,
Sergeant Gonell, thank you so much. Thanks for your service.
You're welcome.
Thanks for speaking up. I feel like you spoke on behalf of a lot of people.
Thank you. Almost made me cry though.
Yeah, it's hard. Wow. So we are actually at 12:15 right now. So I just want to acknowledge that we are over time. Our container has run over. So if you have somewhere to go, if you need to bow out now, no shame. We invite you to go on with your day. But we're going to ask for a couple of comments from the audience if you're willing to stay and do that. Yep. So you may not know from all of these different conversations what an action that you might take would be. But you might have been having a thought that has run throughout these conversations. From our talk about Charlottesville and our acknowledgement of the way our brain works and anxiety, the containers that we can use to bring folks together, and of course, these real life experiences of, when our lives are on the line, what decisions we make. So I invite a few, what's coming up for you?
Here, if you could. Thank
Oh, sorry, yes, please use the microphone. So we've got a Zoom audience.
Sherry Mueller. I still teach occasionally at American University, and I recently heard David Hogue, the anti-gun rights activist who was in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shootout in 2018, and I heard him say that I joined a shooting club because I needed to understand how the people who thought differently than I did, how they got to that place. And so my question for all of us is, what is your shooting club equivalent?
So by that, you meant kind of stepping into somebody's shoes or having an experience that you wouldn't normally have, kind of maybe in the spirit of Braver Angels, yeah? Do you do that, Jesse? Do you?
I haven't quite done that, and I want to now. I love that idea.
What else is coming up for folks? This can be just something you're, thinking about in your own life.
Thank you. Listening to Sergeant Goodell and then also to Jesse in particular, I'm just having trouble reconciling, as I'm sure many of us are, facing true evil. I mean, there's also what we heard about Charlottesville, just facing true evil versus trying to somehow step into someone else's shoes and have that empathy and understand the other side. I mean, when the other side is complete evil, in my opinion, I think in many people's opinion, how do you go to another side?
Yeah, that's a really great comment. In fact, we were just having some of this conversation in a friend group about evil, right? And like whether people can be evil or actions are just evil, or what exactly evil is. And I realize that sometimes it's like a spiritual thing for each individual person's religion. But I think I'm grappling with that because when we consider somebody evil, they are not really, we're not treating them with the same empathy, right? So when does a person slip into that category is a really good question for us to consider. And I like that you phrased it in a question too. Appreciate that. What else is coming up for folks? You can respond to this question about.
Are we responding?
Sure, yeah.
What was the question?
She's asking about basically what are the limits of empathy? What are the limits of empathy given that you might, consider a person evil?
I mean, in my case, look, as I mentioned, more than 40 people attacked me on January 6th. I don't consider them evil. I just think that I don't hate them. I detest what they did, and for the reason they did it. But at the end of the day, I'm at peace with myself. I tried to hold these people accountable in court. Unfortunately, Donald Trump pardoned them before I even got a chance to tell my story in court on some of those cases. The day before, after he pardoned them, I was supposed to be in court at 9 a.m., and I didn't get to do that. I could just succumb to that fear and be hateful towards that, or I could continue living my life, you know. And I chose to be at peace with myself. I cannot control, like Dr. Clark said earlier, do what you can control. If you can't control their behavior or somebody else, then do what you can control. And what I could control is how I act towards that. And I chose not to. My approach has been, you know what? I can't do anything about that. That's whatever is done is done. I have my life. I have my faith. I have my family. That's what I'm trying to.
I mean, does anybody have ideas about that?
I mean, I think, in my opinion, is that it's not so much what they have fear, is what they were listening to.
What they were listening
Because there's no way you could tell me that in the past 60 years or throughout our history that people were not dissatisfied that their preferred candidate won, and they said, you know what, let me go to the Capitol. This was the first time that the current sitting president said, you know what, I lost. You guys do the fight. Gullible enough to believe that there was some nefarious stuff going on, but in the previous election, they didn't think that. You know, God forbid if
Right.
Hillary Clinton or even Joe Biden or Kamala Harris would do the same thing, they wouldn't be okay with that.
So they're listening, you're saying they're listening to a source that is leading them astray, but there's a reason for them listening to, right? There's a reason why, you know, there's something going on where they're like,
Disenchantment with what's happening around the country, I guess.
yeah. I mean, unless we believe that everybody is a robot and just following orders, right? What do you think about that?
I do have thoughts on evil, and I could have given a different address on that. You know, I do believe there is such a thing as something, you know, we could call evil. And so in Braver Angels are there ever any lines, right? I said anything, we could debate anything, but what about, like, are there people who do deserve to be rejected, to not belong? There is such a thing as a psychopath, right? Like, there are people who are bad actors. So I would never, in Braver Angels, it's clear, like, we don't want to get taken advantage of by people like that, who will exploit the fears and the angers, the legitimate fears and angers on both sides. And I think it's very important to keep that in mind. Now, in Braver Angels, we were founded to keep families and friendships together as we struggle with a very difficult political situation where there are legitimate grievances. Both sides have them, and both sides have their manipulative evil actors. I know, hashtag both sides, right? But we hear from both people who are afraid of the other side in Braver Angels, and I will not say that there are not people who deserve your full condemnation. But I hope that we can help you sort out who those people are versus the people who are looking to maybe a bigger bully to have their back because they're afraid.
Yeah, good. Back to this, like, what is a rational fear? You know, you can have an actual mental illness and have, you know, that designation changes how you see the person. What else, in terms of fear, is coming up throughout these conversations for you? And I'd love to hear anything personal that you want to share. Yeah.
The theme of fear, which I agree with, I have found in being engaged in conversation with people who are opposed to everything I believe in these times, the two ways that I find can help me more quickly find out the root of their fear and keep that discussion going is to ask them when they first felt that way and what triggered it. Because to find out it's very enlightening as to when they began to think that way and what triggered it. And when they tell me their point of view, which frankly I don't agree with, Before I respond, I say, I believe I hear you saying, and I try to repeat as closely verbatim as what I heard them say, and then at the end I say, did I get that right? It's a mirror technique. Immediately they feel they were heard because they can correct me if I did get it right. And I feel then that anything I say in response has a better chance of at least being listened to respectfully. And then I ask for the same response. If they're going, I want them to repeat what they thought I said so that I have the opportunity to respectfully tweak it. And I have found those two methods of beginning and keeping a conversation going has been helpful in keeping my blood pressure down, but also humbly starting to realize where their fear came from.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're leading with curiosity, which is really key, right?
I wish I could.
You're mirroring.
No, I am determined to keep a conversation going because anything less is my defeat.
Oh, okay. So you're asking them for when they started feeling that way, and are you really? And you sounds like you really are listening.
Oh yes. And
So that's curiosity right there.
I mean, I understand where a lot of these grievances came
Yeah,
from because
yeah.
I in my life was fighting the same
Yeah.
grievances on their behalf, and they didn't know it.
Yeah. Where did you learn that mirroring technique?
It's one used in marriage counseling, it's used in mediation, it's used in workplace management.
Yes, it is.
And it's a very effective tool. And the other, one last one is the phrasing. I often say, I invite you to consider the inherent use of the word invite. We get invited, we can accept it or we can reject it. And when I start that way, people don't go into a defensive mode as to how they're going to respond. So I find by saying, I invite you to consider my point of view. And I also often use the word, can I count on you to listen? Studies have shown that the minute somebody says they can be counted on, the likelihood they will be goes up dramatically.
Super helpful.
Thank
and
you for that. Yeah, Darcy,
very
thank-
true about the, those are classic communication skills that we teach in therapy offices to couples and families and people that can't hear because can't hear each other before reacting to what they think they heard or some combination of what was said and what they thought was heard. I just want to piggyback on curiosity. You know, when we talk about getting overloaded with anxiety, and I reference the amygdala yelling, and in the brain it actually floods our ability to think sometimes when we're overloaded with anxiety. One of the gateways to making sure we're thinking clearly is staying curious. So if you can ask a question, if you can say back, use your mind to say back what was just said, that actually takes a cognitive skill that you might not think is very important, but it's calming you down as you're listening and trying to language back what you just heard. So there's a lot embedded, beautiful things embedded in what you said. Thank you.
That's a great tip. Thank you for that. Okay, one last comment, and then we'll. Oh, I'm sorry.
I invite you to consider that
I love that we're applying what we learned.
that there may not just be male and female, it may be ambiguous genitalia and all sorts of things in between. There may not be just black and white, that maybe I'm related to Lucy from Africa. It's like, come on, why do we have to list it like that? Why can't we have an other human and we're all in this together?
Thank you. Good sentiment. Did we have one last comment?
My name's Randy. I actually am with Braver Angels as well, work with
Oh,
Jesse
great.
often. I often lead communication workshops. And just to piggyback on the idea of curiosity, one skill that we teach is called the pivot. And after we have made someone else feel heard and we confirm that we have a good understanding of what they believe, we ask, are you interested in hearing my perspective? And I think it appeals to their self-image of curiosity, right? Because, and in a similar way, when you ask someone, are you curious about someone else's viewpoint, it is very rare that they will tell you, no, I don't want to learn from anyone else. I just want to hear my own viewpoint. So I want to really reinforce what you've said, what all of us have said. I think these are really important techniques to lean on. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Cameron, should we wrap this up?
I think it's time.
Yeah, okay. I want to make sure that we don't leave too late here. Callie, you're going to bring us home
Sure. In just a second.
as soon as we're mic'd up. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
I just want to wrap up. If you know me, you know I don't shy away from an opportunity to reflect. So I just wanted to offer my sincere thanks to the speakers here this morning and to reflect by saying, as I've listened to you all, I'm reminded of Lincoln's words to Congress in defense of his emancipation policies, which incited fear across the nation. He said, "The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so must we think anew and act anew." I think our own stormy present calls on us to turn toward our fears, to understand them better so that we can think boldly and act bravely. And again, I want to express my sincere thank you to all of our incredible speakers today for planting the seeds of your own brave ideas to propel us forward with conviction and with purpose. Thank you all. I also want to thank all of you in the audience today, whether you're joining us in person or virtually, for being here with open minds and open hearts. I want to say a special thank you to members of Team Lincoln who are here. We are especially grateful for your support and your many words of encouragement. They are truly life-giving right now. And for anyone who is interested in Team Lincoln, it is a wonderfully supportive community of people who have joined our mission to preserve this place and make possible our programs that foster empathy and encourage people to act on their own brave ideas for justice. Team Lincoln members receive exclusive opportunities and benefits, including complimentary admission to programs like this one, behind-the-scenes experiences, and access to a really wonderful community of people. And finally, I want to acknowledge, this is where I tear up, the hard work of the Cottage team. Events like this touch every single part of our organization and call on the curiosity and creativity of every member of our small and mighty team. To Cameron, who thoughtfully developed the theme and speakers for today's program, and for Joan and Haley for crafting the extension component and making it possible for people to connect with us virtually. To Hannah and Emma, Rebecca, and Kiese for your outreach to the public and our members and for taking really good care of people while they're here. To Molly and Jess for making it possible for people to take home a reminder of their experience today. To Jeff and Seth for preserving this place so that moments like this one can happen again and again and again. And to Paul, Sarah Grace, Francisco, Jules, Wesley, and Rachel for introducing nuance and complexity to the conversations you facilitate daily. Thank you. You are all gifts to me, you are gifts to this organization, and you are gifts to the world. A few last reminders. If you're planning to stay for the extension part of this program, please meet downstairs for lunch and further instructions. We do still have some tickets available for that, so if you're interested in joining and haven't gotten a ticket yet, you can get that, I believe, at the shop table just outside these doors. Sergeant Gonell is graciously doing a book signing. You can purchase his book also at the table just outside the doors. The signing will be just in this room over here. And lastly, if you want to stay engaged with the Cottage, you can do that with a membership through Team Lincoln or by attending some of our other program offerings. On May 5th, we will be doing our first ever preservation clinic for Preservation Month, where you can work side by side with our Director of Preservation and our Buildings and Grounds Technician to restore some of the historic cottage windows. It is going to be a really unique and incredible experience to work with them to restore some of the windows through which Abraham Lincoln reflected from this place. And I just can't imagine anything better. So if you know someone who likes to get their hands dirty, this is the program for them. Also, if you know someone who likes bourbon and or bluegrass, our 10th annual Bourbon and Bluegrass Festival, which has been voted the best music festival in DC, is May 17th and 18th, and we would love to welcome you all here for that. So I just want to say thank you to our team, to these incredible speakers. We are better for having been in your presence today, and thank you so much for being here.